What happens when you feel unqualified and unequipped to do something meaningful for God?
That's what we're going to be unpacking on today's episode.
Have you ever thought that I really want to do something awesome or great for God, or that God might be calling you to do something awesome and you're like, there's no possible way that I can do that?
All the time.
Or surely he's mistaken and he's got the wrong person.
All the time.
Yeah, I think we've probably all been there. And for a lot of people, I feel like maybe things from their past or just current circumstances or just that whole feeling of being unequipped to do something really plays a big role in what we step out and do for God.
Yeah, and so there's this phrase that I've heard over and over and over again, and the people mean well, and I guess you could say that it's accurate, but I think it does a disservice for everyone that really wants to do something great for God. And that is, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. But I don't think that's actually true.
All heard that. I think I have to agree with you.
I mean, it depends on what you mean by he qualifies the called. But it does not mean that he takes someone that's unqualified and gives them all the qualifications so that they can step in and do it. That's what it doesn't mean.
Right.
It means that he calls someone that's unqualified, does it with them anyway, and then everybody says, well, he did it, so he's qualified.
When in reality, we should be saying, well, that had to be God, which is what God wants.
Exactly. That's what, anytime he calls you to do something worthwhile, it's probably going to be something that you can't do.
Can't do on your own.
And nobody ever is going to look at like David and Goliath and say, well, David was qualified.
Right.
You know, that sling, except for maybe Malcolm Gladwell, which I think is probably one of the worst ideas I've ever heard in my life, that Goliath was some kind of handicapped, blind soldier that couldn't even get on the battlefield on his own. He had to have someone leading him, and that the stone fell into a chink in his armor and caused him to trip. And, I mean, it was completely ignorant. And Malcolm, he actually says that David could probably hit a flying bird with the stone. In other words, it was all in David's skill. That completely misses the point.
Absolutely.
The reason Saul said, wear my armor, take my sword, is because David was unqualified.
Right.
He was unequipped. And everyone
There's a reason he wasn't
knew that.
on the battlefield to begin with. I mean, he wasn't there even to participate in the fighting. He was there to deliver food to his brothers.
Yeah, and look what he says to the giant when he comes out. He says, "You come to me with a sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord." In other words, I'm coming to you with something that is out of the realm of my possibility. I'm not coming to you with my talent, my abilities. Right. And I think that is one lesson that I've had to learn. And I think that everybody that does anything great for God has to learn at some point.
Yeah.
Is that when God calls us to do something, he gets no glory out of us accomplishing something on our own abilities.
Right.
Why did he? Now, we've got all kinds of examples. Just about every scripture character
right.
has this example. But take the example of Gideon.
Yeah.
Gideon has a huge army, and he's going into battle. And what does God say?
We're going to get rid of some of these folks.
Cut some soldiers. We have too many soldiers, cut them. So he sends everybody home that wants to go home. And then God says,
let's do it again.
You still have too many soldiers. Right. And so he does this test. He ends up, Gideon, with 300 men. When he had thousands of soldiers before, now he's down to 300. And God says, yeah, that's a pretty good number.
300
you have
against
no hope
this,
to win this battle.
Impossibility.
Go to battle.
And we feel like that sometimes.
I know.
It's like we feel like we're the ones that I've only got 300 and I'm facing an army of thousands. There's no possible way I can accomplish that. And we think that when we are just looking at the numbers or just relying on what resources that we can see. And
yeah, we're trying to see how things add up.
Yeah.
And if they don't add up, suddenly our faith comes crashing down because we don't see how we're going to accomplish this. Take the story, which we just talked about a few Sundays ago, was when the children of Israel started complaining because all they had was manna.
Yeah.
And God told Moses, basically, I'm going to judge them by giving them what they want. I'm going to send them a persecution through answering their prayer. They wanted meat. He said, I'm going to send them more meat than they can handle. And I'm going to tell you all the things that he said that meat would do to them, but it was just gross. In other words, they're going to eat this meat for, a long time until it makes them sick.
Right.
And Moses takes this idea, okay, God's going to send meat and it's going to be a judgment. How are we going to do this? Am I going to pull all the fish out of the sea? Am I going to kill all of our animals?
We don't have enough cattle.
It wasn't adding up. It was like, how in the world is this going to happen? And what he didn't realize is that God had a plan all along. He was going to bring millions of quail and just drop them all throughout the camp. And so usually when God's doing something, it doesn't add up.
Right.
When it adds up, it's probably our doing.
Yes.
If everything adds up, we might want to take a second look at it.
Right, because who's going to get the glory?
But the point is not trying to figure out God's miracles. The point is, how many people end up doing anything worthwhile, spiritually or in their life, out of fear that they're going to fail? The fear of failure. You read any self-help book, go to any seminar, somebody is going to be talking about overcoming your fears and being willing to fail.
Right.
Because if you're not willing,
how many people don't do something?
Yeah, they don't. Yeah. They don't get the new job because they're worried about what's going to happen if they quit this job, or they don't go to school because they're worried about what is going to happen, or they don't go for this relationship. There's fear kind of dictates what we do or don't do. And in the kingdom of God, I think there is a lot of that fear associated, but also this idea that I'm not qualified yet, so I can't do anything.
That could come from, I think, too, sometimes we let things from our past, or maybe that we don't feel like we're a good enough Christian, or that we're far enough along in our relationship with God, or if we've grown enough, we're not like so-and-so that we have put up on a pedestal and think, they're amazing, they've got it all together. So of course God could use them, but he can't use me.
Yeah, and here's a secret. Nobody has it all together. No. We're all faking it. No, but we all have this facade that everything's good in my life and I've got everything together, except for maybe the people that like to get attention because everything's going wrong.
Yes, but that's another subject for another video.
Another subject. But we measure our real self against other people's facades.
Yeah.
And so when we want to do something for God and we see holy Mike over here, sorry, Mike, I don't know you, but you're the example here. So we see holy Mike over here, and we know that he could step in and do this far better than we ever could. And so because we know he can do that, we don't want to go over here and make a mess of things, and then Mike have to step in and rescue us because that would hurt our pride.
Right.
Or we don't know how to get started. We don't know. And the thing is that, so Jesus...
always a good person to go back to.
Yeah.
So Jesus.
When he's talking about, come to me all that are weary and heavy laden. You've got too many burdens on you. You've got the yoke of
this world
on you, and everything's weighing you down. Come to me. I'm going to take that yoke off of you, and I'm going to give you rest. Sounds really good.
Yeah, until you read the next.
And then he says, take my yoke upon you.
Right.
In other words, I'm going to free you from this yoke, and then I'm going to put you to work pulling my cart.
Right.
And he says his burden is, his yoke is easy and his burden's light.
Right.
But it's still a yoke. You still go to work. And so from the moment if you're just starting your walk with God, he expects you to put that yoke on and go to work. But one of the things that I've seen in other people's lives and my life is every time somebody gets a desire, whether you're a brand new Christian or you've been a Christian for years, anytime somebody gets a desire to do something for God, they wrestle with this idea that I can't.
Yeah.
And that is a lie.
It is, absolutely.
We need to understand that everything that God wants to do, again, he does it to get his glory. And if he's going to work through us, he is going to accomplish something that we couldn't accomplish on our own. So why do we let the fact that we can't accomplish this on our own hold us back?
Right, keep us from doing it. It's kind of, we talked about the children of Israel and Moses, and he is a perfect example of that idea. Okay, God, you're asking me to do something, but I'm not good enough. I'm not qualified. I don't have this. I
can't speak well.
Right. And what did God tell him?
He said, "What's in your hand?"
Do you know what that is? It was a staff.
A stick.
Yeah. And oftentimes that's what we feel like we have. Like, all I have is a stick, God. That's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
But God still expected him to do something with what he had.
And think about what God was asking him to do.
Yeah.
To walk into the throne room of the most powerful man in the world, who had bodyguards all around him carrying swords, bow and arrow, whatever else they had. And God's asking him to walk in there and stand before Pharaoh and make demands of Pharaoh. And Moses says, "I can't." And God says, "Hey, Moses, what's that in your hand?" It's a stick.
Yeah.
It's not going to do much against Pharaoh's armies.
Right.
It's not going to do much against his 300-pound bodyguard. But what did God end up using?
He used the stick.
The stick.
Yeah.
And
he also, so that's an example of him not maybe feeling like equipped, but he also had a past because he grew up in Pharaoh's home and ended up murdering someone and ran for his life. And now he's got that kind of hanging over him, even when it comes to his influence with the children of Israel. So he's knowing, and I guess to me, I would think, God, are you picking the right person? I'm going to go back and they're going to see me as a murderer.
Exactly. Why don't you send Aaron?
Yeah.
And God was like, "No, I'm picking you."
So if you think your past is keeping you from being used by God or doing something great in his kingdom, think again. He can use you no matter what your past is.
Well, one example of all of this, I think that probably carries more weight than any other examples for us is God calling us to Seattle to start the refuge.
Right.
Because I'm an introvert. I know church planters. I am nothing like them. Successful church planters, they have, this attitude like Danny Aber. He can walk into a room of strangers and start picking on everybody, and everyone just falls in love with him. I walk into the same room, try to pick on one person, and they shoot me. That's
not a real example.
No, that's just the difference in personality. And so when God said, "Go to Seattle," into a city that's super expensive, one of the most expensive cities in the United States, and we didn't even have enough money in our bank account to pay for gas to get here. Obstacle number one, you can't afford it.
This is impossible.
Obstacle number two is that you can't do it. I told God over and over again, I can't do it because I can't.
Right.
We can't.
We can't.
And here we are, we're sitting in our church building in downtown Seattle. Miracle after miracle that God has performed. And we've got a church here in Seattle, and we're still building this church. And when I look back on it, I don't even understand how it all happened. It just was God. It wasn't me, not me at all. And we have a dream to plant 5 churches around Seattle over the next few years. And with every church that is planted, I promise you, it's not me. It's not my abilities. It's not my acumen. Definitely not my charisma. But it's all God. And I remember the first time I came to Seattle as the church planter. So we drove up here from Tennessee. We were living with your parents in an RV, or not an RV, but a travel trailer thing.
Yeah.
Great timing. They moved out of they downsized from a 3-bedroom house into an RV temporarily, and that was the time we were coming up here to stay with them. So we got to stay in this little thing for a month or so.
With my parents, my sister,
a giant dog,
a giant Labradoodle,
our
and
little dog,
our little Yorkie.
It was crowded.
It was a wonderful time.
Yes. We got to spend Christmas in that thing, didn't we?
We did. We did.
Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I remember the first time I put on my suit and my long dress coat.
Yeah.
I was going to be Mr.
Snatch.
Sharp. And I came to Seattle, and I was going to pass out flyers to have a Bible study. And my faith was sky high. I was going to win the whole city. And I start out, now I'm an introvert, so approaching people, even to hand them a flyer, is not something that I'm cut out for.
No.
Yes.
No.
Talking about levels of consequences, that is level 1, huge.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I come downtown. Can't remember if I came, you might have dropped me off. I can't remember. Anyway, so I'm all decked out. I've got my little flyers for Bible studies, and I go walking around the streets, ready to just win the masses. And I learned really fast that on the streets of Seattle, passing out flyers is a death sentence to an introvert because nobody wants them.
No.
One comedian, I think it was Mitch Hedberg, once said that someone handing me a flyer is like saying, "Here, you throw this away." And that's what it felt like. It felt like I had some weird disease or something, because people would walk by and move over to the other side of the sidewalk.
They won't make eye contact. If you try to put something from it, it's like you're not even there. You just keep walking.
I had one woman take it, walk about half a block away, then come back and give it back to me. I don't want this.
Now that is bad.
For an introvert especially, because it just took all of my willpower to approach you and hand you that. Anyway, after 30 minutes of this new venture, my faith went from sky high to 0. And one more time I was saying, God, I cannot do it.
Right.
And what I learned is that God wasn't expecting me to be able to figure it out. He wasn't expecting me to equip myself with a new personality.
Right, to become something that you weren't.
That I'm not. Yeah. And he wasn't asking me to go out and by sheer force of will build a church. Matter of fact, he spoke to me and told me, I didn't call you here to build a church.
Yeah.
I called you here to plant seeds.
Yeah.
And the farmer, when he's planting seeds, he reaches in his bag and throws them out.
Yep.
Or now he drives a tractor and it just spits them out. But he's not walking around agonizing over every seed that hits the ground. He understands, I'm throwing out enough seed, something's going to grow. He doesn't make it grow. He doesn't try to force it to grow. He just knows that I do my part, it happens. And God was telling me, that's what I'm asking you to do. Just go do what you can do.
Right.
Use your stick, Moses.
Right.
Use your sling, David. Use your 300 men, Gideon.
Right.
He was just asking me to do what I could do and leave everything else up to him. And so I even think that I've dropped the ball on doing what I can do many times. And God has just ran ahead of me, and I'm running to catch up. And so we've been here now, going on almost 4 years?
We'll celebrate 4 years in July.
4 years in July. We don't have churches of hundreds yet, but where we are, I never thought we would get here.
No, it's been amazing. It's a great testimony of the fact that it doesn't matter if you feel unqualified or unequipped. If you'll just trust God and trust that He's the one that's going to do it anyway. He's just wanting you to be willing to step out there and say, okay, God, if you want to attempt this and you want to use me to do it, then here I am.
And every time you do that, God does something through you that you could not do on your own, so that He gets the glory for it.
Right. So don't let the idea that you're unequipped or unqualified, don't let your past, don't let looking around going, this isn't adding up, keep you from doing something great for God. If you have a desire to do that, or if you feel like God is calling you to do that, just trust Him, step out and say, here I am, use me, and watch Him show up and get the glory for it.
Yeah, and I think, everyone can do something for God. A lot of times because we don't think what we can do is great, we just won't do anything.
Yeah.
Everyone can do something, whether it's cleaning the church, handing out flyers, teaching Bible studies, or just any little thing that you can do. If you've got a stick in your hand, use the stick.
Yeah.
And God has a way of it's just a stick, but with God it turns into a snake that eats other snakes. And then suddenly Moses is the only one with a stick, and everybody else that had sticks are like, his stick ate our stick, you know? And so God just has a way of exploding and compounding anything that you try to do. But don't wait until you feel like, oh, now I'm qualified, I can do this, because you will be waiting for the rest of your life. Just start doing something.
Yeah, I think anyone that you ask that has done something great for God, whether it started with something small or it's something that you're seeing now as a big, result, if you ask them, they will say, no, I did not feel like I was qualified. When I stepped out, I was scared.
Yeah, exactly.
But I stepped out anyway. And if you do the same thing, you're going to see the same results.
Yeah, it's not by might, it's not by power, but it's by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Therefore, don't trust in your might, don't trust in your power, trust in His Spirit. Even when Paul had the qualifications to step into Greece, who was all about knowledge and debate and oratory, Paul could have stepped in there and went toe-to-toe with any of their orders, and it wouldn't have done any good.
Right.
That's why Paul said, I came to Corinth, and I didn't come with enticing words of men's wisdom, but by a demonstration of God's power.
Right.
He understood that I can come in and wow a bunch of people, but it's not going to do any good. It's got to be something that God does if it's worth anything.
Yeah.
So forget about being qualified. Just go do something.
Just do something.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't grow.
Right.
It just means that you shouldn't wait.
Exactly.
Do something now, because God can work through you right now.
Absolutely. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. You can share it on social media, and leave us a comment below, maybe sharing something in this video that really spoke to you, or another topic that you'd like to see us cover on an unpacking episode.
Yep, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.